Spirit of sacrifice. Sacrifice needs great moral courage, rectitude, and a sense of being an integral part of God's creation. One may make little sacrifices for one's family, friends, and loved ones, but this is more of a duty than a selfless act. True sacrifice is free of emotional attachment and filial concerns. It embraces entire humankind and whole societies in its ambit. Real sacrifice lightens the mind of the doer and gives him a sense of peace and joy. It takes considerable moral strength and a benevolent heart to forego what is rightfully one's own, in the larger interests of the community and society that one is an integral part of. Wealthy people do espouse philanthropy, but for an ordinary, middle-class person to give away what he sorely needs is no mean task. Rattan Sahu was one such man who happily gave up his inheritance for a greater cause, and despite protests from his wife and children, continued to live in want. Here's how.
Can you imagine what we'll be able to do with the money?
Sumi trilled excitedly.
We'll buy a new car for you to drive to work and buy the latest LED TV. That fridge of ours has outlived its utility. We'll get a new one. Raju has been needling me for a bike for months. He'll get his bike now.
Suman wants. Rattan listened to his wife recite the long list of newly conceived requirements. He felt strangely disturbed, not quite enthusiastic about this almost obscene display of material greed. Nevertheless, he kept his silence.
Why don't you say something?
He heard his wife, Sumi, ask him curiously.
Oh, huh?
He sighed tiredly.
I'll get some sleep, dear. It has been quite a tiring day at the office today.
He said softly and turned over, away from her on the bed. Rattan Sahu was a first-generation urbanite, having been born and brought up in a village about 100-odd kilometers from Cuttack, where he worked and lived now. He had a comfortable job with an export firm dealing in handicrafts and silverware, working as a vendor development executive. He had 3 children with Sumi, his wife married for 20 years, lived in a rented house, rode an old scooter, and strived hard to give a good education to his children, while trying his best to keep his family in comfort. Recently, his father had passed away at his ancestral house in the village, and it was only yesterday that he received a call from the lawyer, asking him to be there and take legal charge of the property that he was the sole heir to. It was roughly 80 acres of prime agricultural land and a large two-storied house that he had inherited. At present market value, it would easily sell at about 30 to 40 lakhs, a huge amount for a person who had only 20,000 rupees in his bank account. His eldest son Raju had to be sent to an engineering college, which meant more expenses than he could handle at the moment. Usha, his daughter, was 16 already, and they will have to think of her marriage in a few years, more expenses. Rattan slipped into a troubled slumber, thinking these thoughts. As Rattan was leaving for the village the next morning, Sumi said wisely,
Do strike a good bargain for the land and house. Don't worry if it takes a few days more. You have already taken a week's leave from work.
Rattan reached his village by noon. The lawyer was waiting for him along with the village patwari. Documents were signed, deeds changed hands, and by evening Rattan had struck a good deal with the sugar mill owner for the land and the house.
That was easy.
Rattan thought as he lay in his bed. He had 42 lakhs in his suitcase lying on the table in front of him. Rattan thought of his duty to his family. Ratan also thought about the hundreds of children in this village who could never get education because there was no school here, not even a primary one. He remembered his own childhood, when his father had sent him to study in a city. Not all could afford to do that, he thought. What if he donated the money he had to the village panchayat for the express purpose of setting up a school? It would light up the lives of an entire generation and then the next one.
I have no words to thank you, Ratan Da. This is the most noble gesture on your part.
Gushed Amol Dash, the village headman.
We'll name the school after you.
He offered.
No, don't do that.
Ratan said firmly.
Name it after Mahatma Gandhi. His sacrifice was 1,000,000 times more noble. Besides, this land and property never really belonged to me, for I'd not earned these with my own labor. I'm merely handing over to the village and its people what my ancestors had so far held in trust.
Amol stood with folded hands and bowed his head before Ratan's humility.
What have you gone and done, Rattan? You've condemned your own family to a life of want and drudgery.
Wailed Sumi dejectedly, upon hearing of his deed as Ratan arrived home.
You have deprived your own children of their rightful legacy.
She raged. Ratan was calm and unperturbed by his wife's tirade.
That money would have brought one family some material comforts. But now it would help hundreds of families hope for a better future with the gift of education that their children would receive henceforth.
He reasoned.
We already have that hope, and God willing, our children will earn their own inheritance with the education they are getting. We shall never want for anything anymore, for the gratitude and blessings of those many people are with us.
Sumi looked at him dumbfounded. Her husband's simple exterior belied the greatness of spirit which lay inside. Despite herself, her respect and love for him had grown manifold in that one moment.